All right, so to speak to that and some other issues in the power sector, and whether or not the politicians in their manifestos concerning what they promise can do any better. We've got, as you've seen there, Usman Mohammed, who is the former managing director, actually, of Transmission Company of Nigeria. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning, Chamberlain.
Well,
good morning,
we know that there's always a huge question mark about transmission in this country. Whenever there's an issue, there's always transmission always comes into the mix, one way or the other. You've seen that report, and you've been there. So first, could you start with giving us your impression of where our power sector is at the moment?
Thank you very much, Chamberlain. If you look at the power sector as at today, I think things are worse than when I was removed in May 2020. We have, at that time, the main problem that we are facing are transmission and distribution. Generation, we had enough generation at that time. The only problem we have is that there are certain areas that we need to have generation for balancing the grid, for voltage support. If a place is located far away from a generation station, you have a voltage problem. So places like Maiduguri, places like Kano, we have voltage problem. But at that time, we don't have problem of generation inadequacy. But unfortunately, as of today, we also have problem of generation inadequacy. If you look at a station like Egbin, which is the largest generation plant in Nigeria, that has a capacity of over 1,300, they can't generate more than 500 megawatt as of today. Some of the power plants...
Which generation plant is that?
Egbin in Lagos. Okay. Now, if you look at some of those power plants that are around Afam and Alauji, some of them are significantly having gas constraint. I think some of the IOCs moved out, and I think we are not able to manage them very well. So we have significant gas supply problem.
What about the dams?
Yes, the dams, there we have Kaenji and Shiroro. I think the awarded contract to recover certain hydro turbines. I think they have made some progress. Maybe they have recovered one or two, but that cannot fill the gap of this shortage of gas supply. So we are now, sometimes we don't generate even up to 3,000 megawatt. That is the truth.
I know that, in fact, before we go to some of what the politicians say they want to do, there's this PPI, Presidential Power Initiative, which used to be Nigeria Electricity Roadmap. Now, the government says they have that project. It was supposed to be in 3 phases. And ultimately, it was meant to give us some 25,000 megawatts. The first phase was supposed to be 7,000, 11,000, then 25. They've taken delivery of some items, and so the president is really optimistic about that project getting us far ahead. How do you see that play?
Thank you very much. I came from African Development Bank. I actually came because Manitoba Hydro, that was managing TCN, did not manage the company very well, and it became very problematic. Some of the problem that was created by Manitoba Hydro include the fact that for 4 years that they managed TCN, there was no single audit of the organization. And they expand the managerial cadre of TCN from 10 general managers to 46 general managers. And then from 11 assistant general managers to 134, which is like anarchy. You are like you managing a company with 46 directors. How do you explain that kind of issue? So this is one of them. And then they have not been able to raise a single investment for all the 4 years that they are. Of course, some of the fault are not theirs. We have also problem as a country. But we paid officially $32 million for Manitoba in managing TCN. So when their term ended, the government, in wisdom, invited me. Chamberlain, the government approved my appointment actually on the 19th of August 2016, but I didn't come till December because of the problems associated with our country. I actually didn't want to come. But when we came, we came after we discussed and agreed the guideline and how we are going to work with the government, that is the then Minister of Power. We started with a program because I worked in the sector, I know all the problems. So I came with a plan actually. Within this short time that we came, we were able to do the 20-year least cost transmission expansion plan that looked at our expansion and excluded the need for us to go for what they call super grid, but stated in that report that we should restrict ourselves to the expansion at 330 at this level. But we can explore the other options of 330. That was how we come up with the quad line. It's the first time that we have quad line in Nigeria. And then after we conducted the study and we came up with the 20-year least cost transmission expansion plan, we now came up with the transmission rehabilitation expansion program. Under that program, that is how we got that Abuja ring this thing that had a line that will come from Lafayette to Abuja, which will give Abuja 3 sources of 330 to Abuja, which means that if 2 lines goes out, the one from Ajakuta to Abuja and the one from Shiroro to Abuja, they goes out. Abuja will still have supply. Why? Because we will have 330 that is coming from Lafayette. But let me tell you what happened. I think so that we don't waste too much time on talking on the history, but this issue of Presidential Power Initiative, actually, it came in the same way the NIPP happened. And if you look at all the picture that is painted, and if you look at the video of how they will electrify Nigeria, you think that this is something that is going to talk this. But I want to ask you, has anybody ever told you the scope of this Presidential Power Initiative, especially for transmission?
What do you mean the scope? Because
what are the content? What are the content of the project? How many substations are they going to build? How many lines are they going to build? As of today, the content of that Presidential Power Initiative is intervention in upgrading in 7 substations. That is the one that is currently going on. Then they are supplying some mobile transformers and spare transformers.
Yeah.
That is what it is.
Yeah, because the president
now
says,
I want to tell you something.
Let me just add this to it. He says that 10 power transformers, 10 mobile substations would have been delivered and installed by May 2023. So
what I want to tell you is that what is 10 mobile transformer and 10 spare transformer? What is it? What we are talking about is that all this thing that they're talking about is not up to 2% of what we are doing under the transmission rehabilitation expansion program. And yet, the moment the government put this issue of doing the Presidential Power Initiative, they distracted TCN from focusing on what they are supposed to do.
So, Dr. Mohammed, are you saying that this PPI cannot achieve the first phase of 7,000 megawatts?
How will 7 upgrading in Apo, upgrading in what do you call it, in Talata Mafara, upgrading in Katampe and 4 other substations take you to 7,000 megawatts? It's not possible. So instead of us to focus on the the one that we have worked on, first of all, we have carried out all the studies. Let me give you an example. We embarked on a project in Lagos. We are putting 4 330 kV substations between Ogun and Lagos. One at Aribajo, one in New Abara, one in Mountain on Fire, and then one in this one other place. Then 132 in Life Redeem, and then another one in Badagry. This project include lines 330 and 132. All the studies have been concluded when I was in MT. We have concluded this study, and this project is putting power at the industrial base of Nigeria between Lagos and Ogun.
How much
when
power?
I was MD.
How much power is it putting?
It's putting 4 330 kV substations and 2 132 kV substations, brand new.
A total of how many megawatts?
So many megawatts. I can't calculate here and give you, but so many megawatts, and with lines, and it's attacking the industrial base of Nigeria. We've completed the study. We included the counterpart funding, which is the only thing that is needed to pay the compensation for the right of way, which is about 3 billion in the Ministry of Power's budget, as at the time when I was MD, before I was sacked. But do you guess what? Up to now, the compensation for right of way was not paid. The design has been completed. Everything is completed. Now we are focusing on Presidential Power Initiative that Even the studies were not concluded. Which one of the one they are upgrading existing substation does not require study. But now you say you want to close the loop in Lagos between Akamba and Alagbon. Only the scoping study that I did when I was MD, which is getting to 3 years now, up to now we are at that level. And you want to build 330 multi-circuit tower, which will carry 330 and 132, and you have not done the study. Yeah.
This project started in 2021, this PPI, and it must have been conceived before that time while you were still in office. Did you raise any of these objections?
Of course. If you read, I was invited to come from African Development. I told you there are 2 letters that were written by government of Nigeria. But when I was sacked, there was no query, there was nothing. There was a paper that carried out study to find out what happened. I think it was Daily Trust. And what they stated was that the reason why I was sacked is because I didn't align TCN program with that of Siemens. But that's not that project.
I thought they said it was also related to a union matter.
No.
The President General of the union.
No. You see, if you look at the union of TCN, the union comprises of 2. You have Senior Staff Association and you have NIWI. Of course, when I was coming, it was NIWI that objected to my coming. Their thinking was that, there was a publication that I've come from African Development Bank to sack staff. So on the basis of that, they objected to me. As at the time they were objecting to me, they didn't know who I was. Because I've worked with them, they know my character. So because my name was pronounced as Usman Guru Mohammed, my full name, so they didn't know it was me. But when I was in Nepal, my name is Yuji Mohammed. So eventually, when I showed my face, and so the issue died down. At the end of the day, the staff union and us, we are in same page. How? Because we did staff welfare that has never been done in the history of power sector. We mobilized staff and we intensified them, and staff installed 75 power transformers across the country, including more than 10 mobile substations that they are talking about. You understand? So the only disagreement that happened was that there was a time, my first appointment was for 1 year. Because I was one who insisted I don't want to stay longer because I don't even know whether I can be able to solve the problem. Now, the president of Senior Staff Association was one who was, for the whole country, was one who wanted to use his office to become the general manager of Lagos. Okay, but we didn't agree at that time. That was the reason that he was making noise.
Why, if you could just break it down and as short as possible, if you can, why is it that till today we still have issues with transmission? Because whenever we hear generation, they'll tell us, look, we have a huge installed capacity. And then distribution will tell you, well, we also have capacity to distribute to way much more than we're given. But they always say, our problem in the country has always been transmission. Why has that always been a challenge? Of
course, transmission can always be a problem. And it's not only in Nigeria, anywhere. But you have to focus and then come with strategy on how you move. I want to tell you that we took a decision to fix transmission. When I was MD of TCN, I don't think any disco has a problem of transmission and we are not able to fix it. That does not mean that we have solved all the problem of TCN.
Yeah, because whenever more than 4,500 megawatts.
I comment. TCN is supposed to run on the capacity of redundancy, and the electricity actually is supposed to be run on the capacity of redundancy. That was how you are able to have stable power supply, meaning if the generation capacity is 10,000 megawatts, transmission capacity is supposed to be 20,000. And distribution is supposed to double of that transmission. That's how you can have a reliable power supply. But I want to tell you that I don't believe, even as at today, transmission is the main problem. No, the biggest problem is actually distribution. Because no investment came to distribution since the privatization took place. And most of the expansion at distribution were done at 33 kV.
So what is our transmission capacity today?
When I left, our transmission capacity was simulated to be 8,000 megawatt.
8,000 megawatts?
Yes. And as of today, I know the capacity will be around 10,000 megawatt. And I believe that there are several work that I've done after I left. Of course, they were distracted. If they have concentrated on transmission rehabilitation and expansion program, of course, any intervention, including the Siemens, is useful. But to say that it is the Siemens that will take us to this megawatt is a mirage. I don't think, if anybody is challenging, let them come up with the scope. And let's put engineers to analyze and come up with how much would what they are doing going to come up. So, my brother, part of our biggest problem is that we don't have sense of history. we forget things easily and we change from one point to another without reflecting of where we made mistakes. And we are not focusing on fixing the mistake that we made. How did we create a problem for the power sector? We created a problem for the power sector by creating industry that cannot attract investment.
Which industry is that?
That's the power industry. If you look at, apart from the intervention that has been done by government since the privatization, and few interventions that took place in generation, where is the intervention that comes in?
Okay, we'll talk about that because I think the Senate say they've addressed that matter, but we'll raise it. But at the moment, my colleagues would like to have some questions for you as well. Go ahead, guys.
So, Dr. Mohammed, I'm concerned about, the approaches the political parties are proposing to tackle the power problem. For instance, you read some manifestos, they're talking about building new infrastructure. Some are talking about using the Egypt model to address Nigeria's power sector. But I wonder if that's the real problem. You say the real problem lies with distribution, which brings in the problem of funding. Some of the discos are being owed to the tune of 93 billion naira by agencies, and they in turn say that they are owing, the GENCOs. So these party manifestos, in your own view, will they address holistically the problem of power supply if any of them is implemented?
Thank you very much. I think there was a program that took place in Lagos where I was one of the key panelists, where it was organized by PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC. And we analyzed the manifestos of the political parties. And the conclusion is that most of them didn't do any deep down analysis of why we are staying at 4,000 megawatt for years. No, they didn't do it. And then they come up with what you call a declaration that, okay, we are going to move to 20,000 megawatt, well, 25,000 megawatt. But there was no analysis to show how this will be arrived at. So the conclusion is that we believe that most of the major parties don't even understand the power sector. And the fear is that, like previous interventions, it's likely because the power sector has also a significant number of vested interests that will not even allow you to think properly if you don't understand it very well. So there's the belief that if they enter government like that, vested interests will cover them, and at the end of the day, they are not likely going to move forward. But if you talk about this declaration of moving from 4,000 megawatt to 25,000 megawatt, where did we have reference? In history, where did you see a country move from 4,000 megawatt to 25,000 megawatt in 4 years? I can't refer any country that has been able to move like that. So we have to understand that the power industry is a slow industry. It takes time for it for investment in the power sector to manifest. So if you look at clearly what they are stating, it's very difficult to think that they'll be able to move forward. So our thinking is that I think there's need for us to do better engagement with the political parties for them to have a clear understanding of the power sector. And there's also a need for Nigerians to have a consensus, what we can call non-partisan consensus on the power sector, so that we know that any party that comes, this is where we are moving, because one political party cannot solve the problem of TCN. And of power sector. What I mean is that in 4 years, you are not going to solve the problem of power sector. So it means that we have to have non-partisan consensus on how we want to move forward. On the issue that you are talking about distribution, the mistake we made was that we privatized all the distribution network at the same time. We are supposed to have done it in phases so that we learn experience and then we move forward. That is one mistake. The second mistake we did was that we did not carry out the necessary studies. Like, for example, the aggregate technical and commercial loss. We are supposed to have carried out the aggregate technical and commercial loss scientifically before we put up the distribution companies for sale. You have to understand that the distribution company are the cash cow. If the distribution companies doesn't generate the money that is required by transmission and themselves and the generation, there's no way you can move forward. So we have this bulk trader that is guaranteeing everybody. Distribution are not generating the required fund because most of the companies that came don't have the required capacity. Because when we did roadshow, we were told that we are not going to get the required companies that have experience and capacity to run the discourse. So we know they are not going to come. We lower the qualification criteria, and that's how we distributed the companies to ourselves. Now we don't have capacity to run the company. We don't even have the capacity to raise the long-term investment that's required. Nigerian banks, we encourage Nigerian banks to put money there. They put money into it. Now, these Nigerian banks that provided the money to buy those discos are providing money that are short-term. They are not ideal for this kind of investment, and they are very expensive. That is the beginning of the liquidity crisis that we have. So what should we do?
And we've since
most of the discos now are at...
Right, we've seen government even intervening now, taking over and sort of handing them over to new management.
So look at the problem now. Look at
Mohammed. There's a point I'd like to raise.
I agree with you, but
because of time, there's a point I'd like to raise with you. I mean, if you've cast a shadow of doubt over the promises of these candidates to, improve power, 20,000, 25,000 megawatts, you expect that they have advisors who advise them. So I wonder, what will be the fate of other promises they have made again in other areas, security and the economy? But speak to this, because you talked about vested interests, Mr. Mohammed. For the average Nigerian out there, they just want to know why we cannot have uninterrupted power supply. And if you say that the power sector is slow, Nigerians would have a record for being slow, because we've faced this for multiples of decades. So really, if we have vested interests, what then do we need to do? And I'm talking for the candidates now, if they will need to ensure that those vested interests are taken care of in whatever way, such that Nigerians, businesses who need this power, can have uninterrupted power supply.
Thank you very much. I want to inform you that two of the major political parties are actually sent their manifestos to me and asked me to review. And I reviewed, and I also shared it with some experts. And we advised them on what to do. And one of the things that we told them is that, first of all, given the level of vested interest and the level of decay in the power sector, the president has to be the champion. Whoever is going to be the president has to be the champion, and he has to know the power sector from day one, so that when he enters power, he has the knowledge. Not after enter power, he wants to have the knowledge. Because once he made the mistake of entering power without the knowledge, vested interest will cloud him. He will not be able to see people who will be able to advise him. So that is one. So he has to have a significant knowledge of the power sector and from day one. And he has to be the champion of the power sector. The second issue that needs to take place is that the president needs to understand that the power sector is not like other sectors. Other sectors like road and other things, you can actually do corruption and still be able to do something on that sector. Let me give you an example. If you are building a road from here to Kaduna and the road is 9 inches, you can decide to reduce the size from 9 inches to 7 or 4 inches. You will build the road. People will see road and people will apply the road. Whether the road will last for 4 years, 3 years, is another matter. For electricity, if you remove anything or reduce anything, it will not work. And we have examples all over the place. We have built several lines that, if you look at the Ikote-Bene, Ogwaji-Jos line, as the MD of TCN when I was appointed, I had to do what we call emergency procurement of reactors, because there was no reactor. So when you didn't put all those things, they will not work. So it means that the president have to believe that he is not looking for money from the power sector, because if you are chasing money in the power sector, you can't make progress. That is one. Secondly, the president needs to take a decision on what to do to rectify the problem we created during the privatization. For example, I heard that they said they gave matching orders, BP gave matching orders to discos to sell quickly. But what are they selling? Are you selling a company that doesn't have equity? What is the experience of North-South that bought Abuja Disco? Where are they? Where is the money they put in that Abuja Disco? So when you are selling a company that doesn't have good balance sheet, doesn't have equity, what are you doing? So we cannot do the same approach we did at that time to solve the problem that we created. The problem we have is lack of investment into the sector and lack of managerial capacity. We need companies that have managerial capacity, not Eugene Mohammed and Co, who has not run anything, to come and take over the discourse. We also need companies that have balance sheet, that have experience. But of course, there are certain things that government need to do. Government need to resolve the problem of the shortfall, the difference between the market shortfall and the tariff shortfall. We have to agree, and if government is going to issue regulatory instrument to that, that is fine. But the question is that the president have to come up, all the MDAs and all the regulators have to be managed by people who are not only transparent, but they are fearless, they are capable of doing the right thing from day one.
Well, there are certainly several components to some of this, including what the National Assembly appears to be doing, but I guess those will be for another day. Dr. Usman Mohammed, former Managing Director of Transmission Company of Nigeria, thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right,